Welcome in, everyone. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, and get ready, because today we're going on a truly transformative journey.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. We spend so much of our time trying to figure out how to be better, how to learn faster, how to, squeeze more hours out of the day.
You can just invent a 25th hour.
Exactly. But what if the secret isn't about finding more time? What if the secret is about fundamentally changing the quality of the time you already have?
Mm-hmm. That's the real trick.
It is. And for this deep dive, we have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us. We're looking at detailed notes and some really specific excerpts from a phenomenal deep dive by Emma and John over on the Learning English podcast.
Oh, I loved their breakdown of this.
Same here. They tackled a concept that has absolutely revolutionized how people approach complex tasks. They centered their entire discussion around Cal Newport's groundbreaking book, Deep Work.
It's a phenomenal topic.
It really is. And our mission for today is very clear, and it's entirely focused on you, the listener. We are going to extract the absolute most vital nuggets of knowledge from this source material.
Right, to really understand something profound here.
Exactly. How intense focus is not just some trendy corporate productivity buzzword. It's an absolute superpower for mastering any complex skill.
Yeah.
And based on our source material, we're looking at this specifically through the lens of achieving advanced language fluency. We're talking about hitting those highly coveted C1 and C2 levels of English mastery.
Which is so tough. And if you're listening to this right now, and you've ever felt like your learning has simply plateaued, this deep dive is uniquely tailored for you.
Oh, yeah. The dreaded plateau.
It's the worst. Maybe you feel like you're putting in the hours, your schedule is packed, you're always busy studying, but you suddenly realize you aren't actually absorbing any new complex information.
You're just spinning your wheels.
Exactly. The modern learning experience is so often characterized by this incredibly frustrating paradox. We're doing more than ever. We have access to more resources than ever, apps, podcasts, YouTube channels, and yet we feel like we are completely stagnating.
Right. It's like we're running on a treadmill.
Yeah, exhausting ourselves. But when we look up, the scenery hasn't changed.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very foundation of this entire concept rests on understanding the environment we're currently living in.
The modern context.
Right. In the notes we have, John brings up a concept from Newport that is just incredibly vital to grasp. He points out that we are currently living in an attention economy.
An attention economy.
Yeah. Now, think about that phrase for a second. An economy is based on the trading of valuable resources. In our modern world, the most fiercely contested, highly valued resource on the planet is not oil, it's not gold.
Nope.
It's your attention. You, right now, are living on a modern battlefield.
It really is an asymmetrical battlefield, too. Because you're not just fighting your own lack of discipline, you are constantly, relentlessly bombarded.
Oh, the notifications.
Right, we're talking about the ping of notifications, the endless stream of emails, and social media algorithms that aren't just randomly showing you things.
They're built on purpose.
Yes, they are deliberately, scientifically designed by some of the smartest engineers in the world to completely hijack your focus.
It's wild when you think about it that way.
Every single app on your phone is essentially fighting a war to steal your attention away from whatever it is you actually want to be doing.
Which makes doing anything difficult feel almost impossible. And that brings us to Newport's definition of deep work, which Emma breaks down beautifully in the excerpts we have.
She really does.
She points out that Newport defines this concept very specifically. Deep work consists of professional or learning activities that are performed in a state of absolutely distraction-free concentration.
Absolutely distraction-free.
Yep.
That's the key.
Right. And it doesn't just stop at being focused. This state of concentration must push your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit.
It is the act of demanding the absolute most from your brain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can start to understand why Emma calls this a superpower.
Right, because in an attention economy where everyone else's cognitive resources are being endlessly fractured, divided, and stolen by those algorithms, the ability to actually marshal all of your cognitive resources and point them like a laser beam at one single difficult task is incredibly rare.
It's like a lost art.
It really is. It elevates you above the noise. It allows you to process information, solve problems, and internalize complex language structures at a level that someone who is constantly distracted simply cannot biologically achieve.
So if deep work is the superpower, what's the kryptonite?
The shallow end.
Yeah. In the source material, John introduces the other end of the spectrum, which Newport calls shallow work. I think this is where a lot of us are going to feel very seen.
Oh, definitely. Guilty as charged.
Right. Shallow work consists of those non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks that we almost always perform while we're in a state of distraction. It's the busy work.
The things that feel like work but aren't really.
Exactly. The source gives us some incredibly relatable examples to make this concrete for the listener. Have you ever found yourself checking your phone, scrolling through messages while you're only half listening to an English audio lesson?
Or, even more common, scrolling through Instagram while you're supposedly trying to memorize a list of advanced vocabulary.
Yes. Picture this. You've got your fancy new English grammar book open, your coffee is hot, you're feeling great.
You're ready to conquer the language.
Right. 5 minutes in, your brain goes, hey, I wonder if anyone replied to my comment. Next thing you know, it's been 45 minutes and you're watching videos of raccoons eating grapes on social media.
It happens so fast.
But because your grammar book was open the whole time, you tell yourself you were studying. You're doing two things at once, and it feels like you're getting so much done.
Emma actually admits in the podcast that she's totally guilty of this.
We all are.
It feels productive because you're physically moving, your eyes are scanning, you are doing something.
But it's a dangerous trap precisely because of that illusion of productivity. As John notes in the material, shallow work doesn't create any new value, and it's incredibly easy for anyone else to replicate.
It's the absolute difference between merely treading water, expending energy just to stay in the exact same spot so you don't drown, and actually diving deep, swimming toward a destination.
That's a great way to put it.
And when we apply this to the pursuit of advanced language fluency, like reaching a C1 or C2 level, this fragmented, shallow attention is fatal to progress.
For those who might not be entirely familiar with the European grading scale, what does hitting a C1 or C2 actually look like in practice compared to just being an intermediate conversational speaker?
It's a massive jump.
Why is the shallow work so fatal to that specific jump?
It's a crucial distinction. Intermediate English, maybe a B1 or B2 level, is about survival and basic communication. You can order food, you can talk about your weekend, you can get your point across even if you make grammar mistakes.
Right, you survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can often learn that through sheer exposure and a bit of shallow practice. But C1 and C2, that is advanced native-like fluency.
It's a whole different ball game.
It's not about simple memorization anymore. It's about grasping incredibly complex grammar structures, like the nuances of the subjunctive mood or mastering hundreds of phrasal verbs that don't make literal sense.
Oh, phrasal verbs are the worst.
They really are. It's about hearing and internalizing the most subtle pronunciation patterns, understanding idioms, cultural context, and tone.
If you're trying to understand sarcasm in a second language or read a dense academic paper.
Exactly. And you absolutely cannot synthesize that level of complexity when your brain is simultaneously trying to process a social media post.
It's just too much.
The complexity of a C1 task requires the entirety of your cognitive bandwidth. Shallow work strips that bandwidth away, leaving you entirely unable to make the leap from intermediate to truly advanced.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we aren't just talking about abstract concepts of time management or feeling distracted.
No, we're talking biology.
Right, the actual physical biology of your brain. In the source excerpts, Emma steers the conversation toward the neuroscience of focus. The source material brings up the biological mechanics of learning.
Specifically focusing on something called myelin.
Yes, myelin. And this is the part where you realize that learning a language isn't just software, it's hardware. You are physically changing the structure of your brain.
It's a brilliant way to understand what's happening inside your head. When we talk about myelin, we are talking about a very real physical substance.
Okay, break that down for us.
As Emma explains, when you focus intensely on a highly specific, complex skill, like articulating a difficult vowel sound or mastering a conditional sentence, you trigger a biological process.
In the brain itself?
Yes. Your brain starts to wrap those specific neural circuits, the exact ones you are actively using to learn the language, in a layer of fatty tissue called myelin.
Wait, so it's literally physical insulation, like the rubber coating around a copper wire?
That's the perfect analogy. When a copper wire is bare, the electrical signal can leak. It degrades, it travels slowly, and it might not reach its destination effectively.
It shorts out.
Right. But when you wrap that wire in thick, high-quality rubber insulation, the signal is protected. It travels directly, cleanly, and with immense speed.
So when you're doing deep work, you are literally functioning as a biological electrician for your own brain.
I love that, a biological electrician.
You're laying down thick layers of insulation on the exact pathways you need to speak fluently.
And this myelin allows the brain to fire those electrical signals faster and cleaner. Think about the physical feeling of trying to speak a new language.
Okay.
When you are struggling to remember a word, when it's on the tip of your tongue but you just can't get it out, it's because the electrical signal in your brain is slow. It's leaking.
Yeah, because it's uninsulated.
Exactly. But when the word flows out of your mouth effortlessly, without you even having to translate it from your native language first, it's because that specific neural pathway is heavily myelinated. The signal travels instantly.
This is the profound physiological why behind why deep focus actually works. Deep work is the only state that signals to your brain, hey, this specific circuit is crucial right now. We need to insulate it.
Right. It's a signaling mechanism.
It's not just about trying harder. It's about creating the biological conditions required for your brain to upgrade its own architecture.
Which means we have to look at the absolute biological cost of multitasking. Let's say you're sitting there trying to learn English, but you have a dozen tabs open, your phone is buzzing, and you're texting a friend.
The usual setup.
Because your attention is fractured, you are never pushing those language neural circuits to their limit. You're firing a little bit here, a little bit there. You're constantly switching contexts.
The brain is basically saying, wait, are we insulating the English grammar wire or are we insulating the Instagram wire?
And the result is that it insulates neither. The signal is never strong enough or sustained enough to trigger the myelination process.
Wow.
If you are multitasking, those neural pathways are simply not being strengthened. It is biologically impossible. Multitasking biologically prevents the creation of myelin.
So it's a total waste of time.
You can sit there for hours, flipping between your grammar book and your feeds, and from a purely neurological standpoint, you have accomplished absolutely nothing. You haven't built the insulation. You've just tired yourself out.
That brings up a concept I've heard called the cognitive switching penalty, which I think ties right into this.
Oh, definitely.
When you switch from your C1 English vocabulary list to check a quick email and then switch back, your brain doesn't just instantly snap back to the vocabulary. There's this lag.
Yes, that's often referred to as attention residue.
Attention residue.
When you switch tasks, a portion of your attention is still stuck on the previous task. If you check an email from your boss while studying English, even if you go right back to studying, a part of your brain is still processing that email for the next 15 to 20 minutes.
Your cognitive bandwidth is slashed.
You cannot perform deep work when your brain is smeared with attention residue from shallow tasks.
It's terrifying when you really think about it. And it scales up too. In the source material, John introduces what's called the deep work hypothesis.
A very powerful idea.
We've established the biology deep focus builds the brain tissue required for elite skill. But we also live in an environment designed to destroy deep focus.
Right.
The deep work hypothesis marries these two facts to point out an undeniable economic reality.
What's fascinating here is how basic economics apply to our cognitive habits. As our modern world becomes increasingly noisier, as the algorithms get more addictive, the basic human ability to sit down and perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare.
People are just losing the skill.
Most people simply can no longer do it. Their brains have lost the habit, and their environments don't support it.
And Economics 101 tells us that when something incredibly useful becomes increasingly rare, its value skyrockets.
Exactly. The ability to focus is rare, so it's becoming incredibly valuable. Think of it like being an elite athlete in a world where everyone else has suddenly decided to stop exercising and only eat junk food.
That's a great visual.
If you just maintain your fitness, you suddenly have a massive, almost unfair advantage. The people who can still marshal their attention, who can still biologically trigger that myelination process through intense focus, are going to vastly outperform everyone else who's stuck in the shallows of distraction.
They'll just fly past them.
They'll learn faster, they'll solve harder problems, and they will achieve true linguistic fluency, while others remain stuck at an intermediate plateau for decades.
This leads to what Emma highlights in the podcast, which we can call the 45-minute advantage.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you decide to study. You turn your phone completely off. Not on vibrate, not face down on the desk. Off, and in another room.
Which is hard for people to do.
Very hard. You close every single tab on your computer except the one you need. No background music with lyrics, no television on in the background. Just you, completely alone in silence with the advanced English material you're trying to master.
Sounds incredibly peaceful, honestly.
It does. And if you can train yourself to sit in that state of absolute zero distraction for just 45 minutes, you instantly gain a massive advantage over all other learners.
Because think about those other learners. They might be studying for 3 hours, but they're skimming the surface. They're dealing with attention residue. They're checking emails, making coffee, looking at notifications.
They're swimming in the shallow end.
Your 45 minutes of pure, uninterrupted, highly myelinated deep work will propel you so much further, so much faster than their 3 hours of shallow skimming. You aren't just learning, you are operating in a fundamentally different gear.
This perfectly transitions from the biology to the actual mathematics of learning.
Right.
In the source material, John brings up a core defining mathematical formula from Cal Newport's book that encapsulates everything we've been discussing. The formula is work produced equals time spent times intensity of focus.
Simple, but brilliant.
Now, this is a multiplication problem, which means both variables are absolutely critical to the outcome.
This raises an important question regarding exactly how we value our study time. We always focus on the first variable, time spent.
Yeah, people love to brag about time. I studied English for 4 hours today.
Exactly. But they completely ignore the second, arguably more vital variable, intensity of focus. We can see how this falls apart if we look at what we could call the WhatsApp trap.
Let's run the math on the WhatsApp trap. Say you sit at your desk for 3 hours, high number for time spent. However, you have WhatsApp open on your computer screen.
Mistake number 1.
Every 5 minutes, it pings. You read a message, think of a reply, type it out, send a GIF, and then try to look back at your complex English grammar exercise. What happens to your intensity?
Your intensity of focus in this scenario plummets. It might be close to a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Because it's a multiplication formula, if you multiply 3 hours by an intensity of nearly 0, the resulting work produced, the actual learning, the actual myelin generated, is going to be almost 0.
The math doesn't lie.
It literally does not matter that you sat at your desk for 3 hours. As John states in the podcast, the result will be completely mediocre. You've wasted your time because you allowed your intensity to crash.
But then look at the alternative, the 20-minute miracle.
Yes.
Let's look at Emma's side of the equation. What if you only have 20 minutes to spare before you have to leave for work? To a lot of people, 20 minutes doesn't even feel worth it. I can't learn a language in 20 minutes, they think, so they don't even try.
They just give up.
But let's plug it into the formula. Time spent is small, 20 minutes, but your intensity of focus is at a 10 out of 10. You are fully immersed, completely undistracted, operating at the very limit of your cognitive capability.
20 minutes multiplied by maximum intensity will yield incredible, tangible results. It will produce significantly more actual learning than the 3 distracted hours.
It's so empowering.
If you're busy, if you value your time, this formula is the ultimate hack for prioritizing quality over quantity. It's definitive proof that you can respect your own time, study for shorter durations, and achieve vastly superior results simply by guarding your intensity.
Okay, so we have the theory. We understand the biology of the brain, the economics of the attention economy, and the mathematics of focus.
We've covered a lot of ground.
So what does this all mean for our daily lives? How do you, listening right now, take this beautiful theory and make it a reality in a messy, noisy world?
That is the big hurdle.
In the source material, John points out that Newport's book outlines several rules, and the first one is seemingly simple: work deeply. But as John immediately acknowledges, that is incredibly hard to do.
It is, because if you just tell yourself, okay, starting now, I will not be distracted, you are going to fail. We have to understand that simply relying on willpower to avoid distraction is a completely losing battle.
Willpower is useless against these algorithms.
Willpower is a finite resource. It drains throughout the day. By the time you sit down to study in the evening, your willpower is exhausted. If you're relying on sheer mental force to not look at your phone, the phone is going to win every single time. It was designed by engineers to beat your willpower.
This is where the tactical brilliance of the source material shines. Emma explains the solution: you must stop relying on willpower and start structuring your environment through rituals.
Rituals are everything.
Willpower is about fighting your environment. Rituals are about designing an environment where the fight is no longer necessary. She provides a highly specific, actionable example from the text, designating a specific, quiet corner of your house or a specific chair solely for learning English.
It sounds overly simple, but psychologically it is profound. You do not watch TV in this chair. You do not scroll social media in this chair. You do not pay your bills or argue with your partner in this chair.
One purpose only.
This space has one single purpose. By doing this, you are conditioning your brain through environmental triggers. The physical act of moving to that corner and sitting in that chair becomes a cue.
Like flipping a switch.
The moment you sit in that spot, your brain immediately registers, we are here. The environment is controlled. This is focus time. The ritual strips away the need for willpower because the decision to focus has already been made by the environment itself.
The source material contrasts two different ways you can approach these rituals. John mentions the concept of grand gestures.
Right, the grand gestures.
A grand gesture is big and dramatic. It's J.K. Rowling checking into a very expensive 5-star hotel room to finish a Harry Potter book because she couldn't get absolute quiet at home. It's locking yourself in a cabin in the woods for a week to study.
Which sounds lovely, but...
Right, and while those grand gestures can work for massive one-off projects, John emphasizes that for daily learners, for you, trying to master a language over months and years, the grand gesture just isn't practical.
You can't rent a hotel room every time you need to study a C1 vocabulary list.
Your bank account wouldn't survive.
Instead, the source material emphasizes that the rhythmic philosophy is vastly superior for sustained progress. Instead of massive, dramatic bursts of effort, this philosophy is about the relentless rhythm of a daily habit.
A rhythm.
It means making deep work a non-negotiable part of your schedule. It happens at the exact same time every single day without fail.
So if your ritual is to sit in your dedicated focus chair at 7 a.m. for 45 minutes of intense language study, you do it every day. You don't wake up and ask yourself, do I feel like studying deeply today?
Never give yourself the option to say no.
The rhythm removes the question entirely. It simply becomes what you do at 7 a.m., just like brushing your teeth. This rhythmic approach transforms deep work from a monumental, exhausting effort into a natural, integrated part of your daily routine.
Which brings us to what is undoubtedly the most challenging, most uncomfortable part of this entire deep dive.
Oh, boy.
In the source material, John brings up another rule from the book. And both he and Emma agree that it is the hardest rule to actually live by.
And what is that rule?
The rule is simply embrace boredom.
Oh, this one is brutal. Let's think about our modern condition for a second. We have developed a complete, total addiction to novelty. We literally cannot stand to be bored for even a microsecond.
We really can't.
Think about what you do when you're standing in line at the grocery store. 10 years ago, you just stood there, you looked at the magazines, you daydreamed.
You existed.
Today, the very second the person in front of you takes too long to find their credit card, the moment you feel that tiny, creeping sensation of boredom, what do you instinctively do? You reach for your smartphone.
Automatically.
Your hand goes into your pocket without you even consciously commanding it. You pull it out to check messages, read a headline, look at a photo. We have completely eradicated boredom from our daily lives.
And John lays out the profound consequence of this behavior. He argues, based on Newport's research, that if you feed your brain a shiny, novel distraction every single time it experiences the slightest twinge of boredom, you are doing immense hidden damage.
Not just passing the time.
You aren't just passing the time. You are effectively neurologically wiring your brain to be utterly unable to focus. You are actively, continuously training yourself to be a distractible person.
Your brain learns a very clear, very dangerous lesson. Whenever I feel understimulated, a hit of dopamine is immediately available in my pocket.
Yes. So when you finally sit down to do deep work, when you sit down to study a complex C1 English grammar rule, and the material is difficult, and your brain isn't getting an instant dopamine reward, it will panic.
It physically craves the distraction.
It will scream for a distraction because that is what you have trained it to expect. You've taught your brain that boredom is an emergency that must be solved immediately with a screen.
This is such a critical realization. If you want to achieve elite C1 or C2 fluency, you must literally practice being bored. You have to rehabilitate your brain.
It's rehab for your attention.
When you're standing in that grocery store line or waiting for a bus or waiting for your coffee to brew, you must leave your phone in your pocket. You must learn to withstand that highly uncomfortable, itchy feeling of not being constantly entertained.
You have to sit with the silence.
You have to observe your surroundings. You have to let your mind wander without digital input. It's going to feel terrible at first. You'll feel anxious. Your hand will literally twitch toward your pocket. but you have to resist.
To synthesize this profound point, what we're really talking about here is not just language learning. Deep work at its core is the dedicated practice of building mental endurance.
Mental endurance.
Think of a marathon runner. They have to train their lungs and muscles to withstand physical discomfort over long distances. In the exact same way, you must train your mind to withstand the cognitive discomfort of sustained attention without immediate reward.
Boredom is the gym.
Exactly. Embracing boredom in your everyday life is the training ground. It's how you build the mental endurance necessary to sit in your quiet chair, look at a difficult foreign language text, and not run away when it gets hard. You build a capacity to stay in the struggle, to push your cognitive limits, and to ultimately trigger that biological myelination that leads to true mastery.
If you're anything like me, you're probably listening to this deep dive while doing the dishes or driving or walking the dog. And honestly, that is perfectly fine for a podcast. We want you to fit us into your day.
Please keep listening on your walks.
But when it comes to sitting down with that C2 vocabulary list or trying to understand native speakers talking at full speed, you have to treat your attention like the incredibly precious, entirely finite resource that it truly is. Because once you spend your cognitive bandwidth on distraction, you can never get it back.
The source material actually offers a brilliant concrete test to see where your mental endurance currently stands. Emma challenges her listeners with this try, transcribing just 1 single minute of audio without pausing.
Transcribing audio.
Find a minute of complex spoken English, perhaps a minute of a news broadcast, or even a minute of this very discussion, and try to write down every single word precisely as it is spoken, without hitting the pause button, without rewinding, without letting your mind wander for even a fraction of a second.
Just 1 minute. That sounds easy, but I bet it's agonizingly difficult.
It requires an astonishing level of deep focus to hold the sentence in your working memory while simultaneously writing it down and listening to the next sentence. It's a fantastic diagnostic tool to see if you have the mental endurance required for true advanced learning, or if the attention economy has begun to erode your capabilities.
I highly encourage you to try that transcription test later today. But before we wrap up, we need to address the deeper, more philosophical meaning of all of this.
It goes way beyond learning English.
Because while we have focused heavily on achieving advanced English fluency, Emma brings the podcast conversation to a close with a beautiful, profound quote from Cal Newport himself. She reminds us that deep work transcends mere productivity. It isn't just about crossing items off a to-do list or passing a language exam. Newport says, a deep life is a good life.
It really is the foundation of a meaningful life. When you cultivate the ability to focus deeply, you're cultivating the ability to truly engage with the world, with your passions, and with the people around you.
You're actually present.
You are choosing to experience life fully, rather than skimming the surface in a perpetually distracted haze. It's about depth of experience, depth of connection, and depth of understanding.
That's powerful.
And as we leave you today, I want to offer one final provocative thought for you to mull over. We discussed the chilling revelation that feeding boredom with a smartphone actively wires your brain for distraction. It biologically untrains your ability to learn and create myelin. So I want you to look at your life and ask yourself, if every quick, seemingly harmless glance at a smartphone notification is actively degrading your cognitive superpower, what other harmless daily conveniences in your life are secretly robbing you of your ability to focus, to learn, and to live deeply?
Think about that next time you reach for your phone in the checkout line. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us today. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Have you ever had one of those days where you blocked off just a massive chunk of time?
Oh, yeah, like a whole Sunday afternoon or something.
Exactly. Let's say you carved out, 4 entire hours on a Sunday, and you dedicated that whole block to studying or working. You sit down at your desk, you've got your coffee perfectly brewed.
Right next to the keyboard.
Right next to the keyboard.
Yeah.
You got your notebooks out, the laptop is open, and for 4 solid hours, you just feel incredibly intensely busy.
You're totally in the zone. Or, well, you feel like you are.
Right. You're typing, you're clicking between tabs. Maybe you're highlighting things in like 3 different colors. You're firing off quick replies to incoming pings, shifting papers around. I mean, you honestly feel like a beacon of modern productivity.
The ultimate multitasker.
Yes. But then the alarm goes off. The 4 hours are up.
And that's when the crash hits?
Exactly. You lean back in your chair, take a deep breath, and this cold, sinking realization just washes over you. You look at what you actually produced, or, what you actually learned, and you realize, wait, it's almost nothing.
Nothing of real substance anyway.
Nothing. You spent a quarter of your waking day in this absolute flurry of activity, yet you've barely moved the needle on your most important goal.
It's a terrible feeling. You end up asking yourself, where did the time actually go? I was sitting here working the whole time.
But I have literally nothing to show for it.
Right.
If you're nodding your head right now, listener, if you've ever felt that highly specific flavor of exhaustion combined with a total lack of accomplishment, you are absolutely not alone. And more importantly, you are in the exact right place today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because our mission for today's deep dive is to completely dismantle this illusion.
We're going to tear down the false structures of busyness that we all hide behind, and instead we're going to build what we're calling a practical architecture of focus. To do this, we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of notes today. We are looking at excerpts from an advanced episode of the Learning English podcast, which is hosted by Emma and John. And in this specific episode, they do a deep C1 level analysis of Cal Newport's groundbreaking book, Deep Work.
Right.
Now, Emma and John are specifically filtering Newport's ideas through the lens of mastering a complex foreign language.
And we need to establish something right out of the gate here. While our source material today is explicitly applying these strategies to advanced language learners, people trying to master incredibly subtle grammar and vocabulary, the underlying cognitive principles apply to absolutely anything you are trying to achieve.
Exactly. Whether you're trying to write a novel, code a new app, understand quantum physics, prep for a massive corporate presentation, or just learn how to speak Spanish, your brain really does not care what the subject matter is.
It only cares about how you are managing its resources. The mechanics of human attention remain exactly the same across the board. And what's brilliant about the angle Emma and John take is that they skip the theory. We are moving entirely past the what and the why of deep work.
Yeah, we already know focus is good. We know distraction is bad. Today, we're pivoting strictly to the how, the actual practical implementation of these strategies in a world that is desperately trying to distract you.
Right. We're moving from theory to mechanics.
So the first major concept we need to tackle is arguably the biggest obstacle to this architecture of focus. Emma and John highlight a term originally coined by a business professor named Sophie Leroy, which Cal Newport heavily cites. It's called attention residue.
And this concept is a total paradigm shift.
It really is. The moment I read about this, a massive light bulb went off in my head. The core premise of attention residue is that when you're working on something, let's call it task A, and you decide to switch your attention to something else, task B, your attention doesn't actually follow you cleanly.
Not at all. A thick, sticky residue of your attention remains completely stuck behind. It's still processing the original task. Or, even worse, when you try to go back to task A, your brain is still stuck on the interrupting task.
But hold on, let me push back on this for a second, because I think most people, myself included, view attention like a spotlight or a light switch. If I'm looking at a spreadsheet, my brain is 100% on the spreadsheet. If I look at my phone, boom, the spotlight moves. 100% on the phone. Are you saying that's just not how biology works?
That is a complete cognitive fiction. We love the spotlight analogy because it makes us feel like we're in total control, but Professor Leroy's research shatters that assumption. Your brain is not a lightweight spotlight. It's much more like a massive, heavy freight train.
A freight train.
Yes. Think about the physics of a freight train. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to get it moving in one direction. And if you want to change tracks, you can't just pivot on a dime. It takes time and massive amounts of energy to slow down, switch the tracks, and build momentum back up in a new direction.
Okay, that makes sense.
When you switch tasks, a significant percentage of your cognitive processing power is left behind, still spinning its wheels on the previous context. It's literally a biological lag in your prefrontal cortex.
Let's make this incredibly concrete, because the source material uses a brilliant, painfully relatable example. Emma and John paint this vivid picture. Imagine you're studying complex English phrasal verbs. You're really in the weeds, trying to master the nuance of language at an advanced level. You're in the zone. And then, suddenly,
a notification dings on your phone.
Yep. So what's that message?
The classic trap.
We all know exactly what happens in our heads in this exact microsecond. The ding happens, and the internal justification begins immediately. You think to yourself, well, I can't just ignore it. What if it's an emergency?
Right, the manufactured emergency.
Exactly. And then you tell yourself, look, if I don't check it, the mystery of who it is and what they want is going to distract me anyway. It will literally be better for my focus if I just quickly check it and get it out of the way. So you pick up the phone. You look at the WhatsApp message. It's your friend asking a simple question about dinner. You type out a quick reply. The whole interaction, from the moment the phone dinged to the moment you set it back face down on your desk, took exactly 10 seconds.
Just 10 seconds.
10 seconds. You tell yourself, it was practically nothing. I'm essentially still studying. And you look back at your textbook fully believing you've seamlessly returned to your phrasal verbs. But come on, is a 10-second text really doing that much damage? It feels completely instantaneous. How is that actually leaving residue?
That internal justification that a 10-second interruption is harmless is exactly where the illusion traps us. Let's break down the harsh reality of what is actually happening in your brain based on the biology. You might consciously think you're back to studying, but your subconscious is still processing that text message.
What do you mean by processing? I already sent the text. It's done.
Consciously, yes. But in the background of your mind, without you even realizing it, your brain is still analyzing the tone of your friend's message. It's evaluating the phrasing of your own reply. Did you sound too brief? Should you have used an emoji? It's anticipating what they might say back.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I definitely do that. I'll catch myself literally rehearsing the rest of the conversation in my head while staring at a document.
Exactly. All of those invisible background processes require cognitive resources. So when you look back at your complex English phrasal verbs or your coding project or your financial model, you aren't bringing 100% of your mental capacity to the task anymore. You're bringing maybe 60%.
And the other 40% is stuck in the WhatsApp residue.
Precisely. This leads to a massive drop in cognitive performance. You are literally working with a fraction of your intelligence.
That is terrifying when you really think about it. You're sitting there doing the hard work, but you've artificially handicapped your own IQ just because you answered a 10-second text.
And what's fascinating here is that this completely exposes why the very concept of multitasking is a biological myth. The human brain, at a fundamental architectural level, cannot consciously process two complex, distinct tasks simultaneously.
Wait, really? Because people put excellent multitasker on their resumes all the time.
They do, and they're lying to themselves. When you think you're multitasking, you are actually just rapid-fire context switching.
Right.
You are violently yanking your train of attention from task A to task B to task C and back to task A. And every single time you make one of those switches, you pay a severe cognitive penalty.
You accumulate more and more attention residue with every switch.
Exactly. Your brain becomes a computer with 50 different heavy browser tabs open, trying to run complex programs and all of them at once. The entire system slows down, the cooling fan is spinning wildly, and nothing is operating efficiently. You are burning tremendous energy just navigating the switches rather than actually executing the tasks.
If we think about the specific context of the source material, a language learner trying to master the subtle nuances of English, how disastrous is this residue? If I'm trying to understand a concept that requires intense logic and deep memory retrieval, I simply can't do it with 50% of my brain.
You can't. Nuance requires everything you have. You cannot grasp the subtle difference between two advanced grammar rules if a chunk of your brain is secretly wondering if your friend liked your joke in the group chat.
And this applies perfectly outside of language learning too. Think about a software engineer trying to find a bug in thousands of lines of code. Or a writer trying to craft a really delicate, emotional scene in a novel. You can't do that with a fractured mind.
It's impossible. If you are operating with persistent attention residue, you are trapping yourself in a state of shallow cognition. You'll be able to perform rote, simple tasks like deleting spam emails, but anything requiring deep synthesis or critical thinking will just bounce right off of you.
It's like trying to paint a masterpiece while someone keeps jarring your elbow every 30 seconds. And the tragedy is, we do this to ourselves voluntarily. We leave the notifications on.
Mostly because we don't understand the invisible biological cost of the context switch.
Okay, so if context switching is literally sapping our cognitive power, how do we actually stop it? Because I can't just throw my phone into the ocean and move to the woods.
Which brings us to the next major concept from our notes. And I have to say, this is where the source material drops a bit of a bombshell. Emma and John introduce one of Cal Newport's most controversial rules. Are you ready for it?
Let's hear it.
Quit social media. Boom. Just like that. Quit it. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the hosts quickly clarify that this directive isn't necessarily about burning your digital life to the ground and deleting every single account forever.
Right. It's not about becoming a digital hermit.
Instead, it's about fundamentally changing your relationship with the tools you use. It's about adopting what the source calls the craftsman approach. The craftsman approach is a beautifully elegant framework, and it sits in direct opposition to how most of us navigate the modern digital world. To understand it, we have to look at the core philosophy of a master craftsman. Let's say a master blacksmith or a master carpenter.
Okay, picture the master carpenter. What's their deal?
Well, a master carpenter doesn't just blindly adopt every single tool that exists in the hardware store. They don't fill their workshop with gimmicks just because they're new or shiny or because everyone else has them.
They're not buying the Bluetooth-enabled hammer.
Exactly. Before a craftsman brings a tool into their sacred workspace, they ask a very rigorous, unforgiving question. They ask, does this tool significantly aid my core goals? If a tool makes their work substantially better, faster, or higher quality, they adopt it.
If it doesn't?
If a tool is merely mildly convenient, or if it introduces unnecessary complexity or distraction without a massive payoff, the craftsman rejects it entirely. The tool must earn its place in the workshop by providing a significant, measurable return on investment toward the ultimate pursuit of mastery.
Contrast that with what Emma and John call the any benefit mindset. This is the exact trap that almost every single one of us falls into, especially with social media and digital tools. The any benefit mindset says, well, if I can find even one tiny microscopic benefit to using this app, then I am completely justified in keeping it and spending hours on it.
It's a masterclass in self-deception.
It really is. Think about how this actually plays out in your own life. Let's stick with the language learner example from the text. You download Instagram or TikTok, and you start following a bunch of meme accounts that post jokes in English. And you sit there for an hour, mindlessly scrolling through these memes.
I think we all know where this is going.
If someone challenges you, or if you challenge yourself, your brain immediately leaps to the defense using the any benefit mindset. You say, wait a minute, these memes are in English. I am reading English words, therefore this has some educational benefit. I'm practically studying. I mean, I confess, I do exactly this. I'll justify scrolling for an hour because I learned one new slang word. It feels like learning.
It's an incredibly tempting psychological comfort blanket. Let's deeply analyze the psychology behind this any benefit mindset. Why do we cling to it so desperately?
Why do we? Because it feels so good.
We cling to it because true deep work, the kind of work that actually moves the needle on our goals, is inherently difficult. It requires immense cognitive strain. It's frustrating. It forces us to confront our own limitations and struggle through complex problems. Mindlessly scrolling through memes, however, is effortless.
Zero cognitive strain.
Zero. And it delivers a steady, reliable drip of dopamine. By framing that effortless scrolling as learning just because it possesses some marginal microscopic benefit, we allow ourselves to take the path of absolute least resistance without feeling guilty.
We get to indulge in a low-value distraction while simultaneously wearing the badge of a dedicated student or a dedicated entrepreneur scrolling LinkedIn.
Yes. It's a psychological trick we play on ourselves to avoid the hard work of actual mastery.
It's the ultimate hack that actually hacks our own progress to pieces. We are lying to ourselves, plain and simple. We want the reward of feeling productive without paying the toll of actual effort.
And this is where the source material draws a very hard, unforgiving line. Emma and John categorize these things into high-leverage tools versus low-leverage tools.
Break that down for us. What's the difference?
If your core goal is something difficult, like C1 fluency or writing a dissertation or launching a business, an app full of memes is a spectacularly low-leverage distraction. Sure, it might expose you to a new vocabulary word once an hour, but at what cost?
The cost is your attention span.
Exactly. The cost is astronomical. The text contrasts that low-leverage app with high-leverage tools. A high-leverage tool would be reading a dense, challenging novel in your target language or listening to a complex, nuanced podcast. These high-leverage tools require deep focus. They force you to grapple with complex sentence structures, extended arguments, and sophisticated vocabulary and context.
They're difficult. They aren't fun in the same way a 15-second video is fun.
But they yield massive returns on your time and attention. The low-leverage meme app yields almost nothing, yet it completely fragments your attention.
And it brings us right back to attention residue.
Yeah.
If you're studying by flipping between a dense novel and an app full of memes, you are completely destroying the deep focus required for the novel. You are contaminating your high-leverage work with the sticky residue of your low-leverage distraction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the profound realization is that just because a tool or an activity has some minor benefit, that absolutely does not mean it is worth the massive hidden cost it extracts from your attention span.
A tiny benefit is not an excuse to sacrifice your ability to focus deeply.
We must be incredibly unapologetically ruthless about curating our digital lives. We have to adopt the mindset of the craftsman. If an app or a habit or a tool is not significantly, substantially driving you toward your core goals, it is not neutral.
Wait, really? It's not neutral.
No, it is an active hindrance. It is stealing the very cognitive resources you need to succeed. We cannot afford to evaluate our tools based on whether they offer any benefit. We must evaluate them based on whether they are the best possible use of our highly limited, easily fractured attention.
Okay, let's say I'm totally convinced. I get the attention residue. I'm adopting the craftsman approach. I'm deleting the low-leverage apps off my phone, or at least putting blockers on them while I work. But I have to ask a really practical question.
Go for it.
What about the times when we aren't at our desks? What about the mundane points of our day? Commuting, doing chores, exercising. I can't be doing deep work when I'm driving or folding laundry. Is that just dead time? Or is there a way to build this architecture of focus even when we're away from our workstations?
That is a phenomenal question, and it leads to a concept Emma and John introduce that completely changes the game. It's called productive meditation.
Productive meditation. Sounds like an oxymoron. Usually meditation is about emptying the mind, right?
It does sound counterintuitive. But productive meditation is one of the most powerful and, frankly, challenging strategies outlined in our notes. It essentially takes the concept of duck work and makes it mobile.
How does it mechanically work?
The definition is very specific. It involves taking a period of physical activity where your body is occupied, but your mind is completely free. We're talking about activities like walking the dog, going for a jog, folding laundry, doing the dishes, or commuting on a train.
So physical autopilot.
Exactly. The strategy is to take that physical autopilot time and intentionally focus your entire undivided mental attention on a single, well-defined professional or intellectual problem.
The source material gives some incredibly concrete examples for this. Emma and John suggest that instead of defaulting to what we usually do, which is popping in our earbuds and listening to music or a casual podcast while walking the dog, we should use that time for productive meditation.
What's their specific example for a language learner?
For an English learner, they suggest attempting to construct a complex logical argument in English entirely in your head while you walk, or trying to recall 10 specific vocabulary words you learned the previous day and mentally forcing yourself to construct complex sentences using each of those words.
Think about how active that is.
It's incredibly active. You aren't just passively consuming information, you are actively generating it, organizing it, and wrestling with it in your own mind, all while your body is doing the dishes. And if you're not learning a language, you could be outlining a presentation, or trying to solve a specific bug in your code, or mentally structuring a difficult email you need to write.
It is an incredibly generative process. However, we have to ground this conversation in reality. The source text issues a very strong warning here.
Yeah, they don't sugarcoat it.
As wonderful as productive meditation sounds in theory, it is exceptionally difficult in practice, especially when you first attempt it. It is not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel easy. In fact, it is going to feel incredibly frustrating.
Why? Because we're just not used to thinking without a screen in front of us.
That's part of it. But mostly it's because your mind will wander. It is biologically guaranteed. You'll start out with the best of intentions, trying to construct that complex argument in your head, and within 30 seconds, your brain will violently rebel against the cognitive strain.
Oh, Emma and John hit the nail on the head here. They literally say your mind will drift to your grocery list. Or, this made me laugh out loud because it is painfully true, it will drift to an awkward conversation you had 5 years ago.
It's the quintessential human experience.
It really is. You're trying to do something difficult, like mentally conjugate advanced Spanish verbs, and your brain suddenly says, hey, remember in 2021 when the guy at the movie theater said, enjoy your movie, and you said, you too? Let's obsess over that for the next 20 minutes.
It's hilarious, but there's actually a deep biological reason for why your brain does that.
Wait, really? It's not just me being broken.
No, you're not broken. When you attempt productive meditation, you are forcing your brain to do heavy lifting without the external scaffolding of a desk, a notebook, or a computer screen. You are relying entirely on sheer internal willpower to hold a complex thought structure together in your working memory.
And working memory is notoriously fragile.
Extremely fragile. Your brain, which evolved to conserve energy at all costs, will desperately try to escape this highly demanding, high-energy task.
Yeah.
It does this by throwing up shiny, low-energy distractions.
So the 5-year-old awkward memory is a defense mechanism.
Yes. A random memory of an awkward encounter is essentially the brain's escape hatch. It's offering you an emotionally charged yet cognitively simple narrative to distract you from the hard work of holding that complex argument together. It's much easier to cringe at a memory than it is to synthesize new information.
Okay, so when that happens, and it will happen to every single person listening who tries this, does that mean we failed? If I'm walking the dog and I start thinking about the movie theater guy, is the productive meditation session ruined? Should I just put my podcast back on?
Absolutely not. And this is the most critical point to understand about the practice. The meditation part of productive meditation is not about achieving some Zen-like state of a perfectly blank, flawlessly focused mind. That's a huge misunderstanding of what mindfulness and meditation actually are.
So what is the actual goal then?
The true practice, the actual core of the exercise, is the moment of noticing. It is the act of recognizing that your mind has wandered off to that awkward memory, catching yourself in the act of being distracted, and then gently but firmly dragging your attention back to the single, well-defined problem you set out to solve.
Emma and John use a fantastic metaphor here. They call it mental weightlifting.
It's a perfect analogy.
I'm obsessed with this phrasing. When you go to the gym to lift weights, the resistance you feel in the dumbbell isn't a sign that you are failing. The resistance is the entire point. The heavy weight is what causes the muscle to tear and grow. In productive meditation, your mind wandering is the heavy weight.
And noticing the wandering and bringing your focus back to the task, that is one repetition. That's the bicep curl.
Yes. If your mind wanders 20 times while you are doing the dishes and you successfully recognize it and pull it back 20 times, you didn't fail. You just did 20 reps of mental weightlifting.
What you are actively doing in that moment is building the neurological muscle of concentration. It's called neuroplasticity. You are physically reinforcing the neural pathways in your brain associated with sustained attention and executive control.
You're teaching your brain who is actually in charge. You're saying, I control the spotlight, not the random whims of my subconscious.
Precisely. Every time you redirect your focus, you are training your brain to resist the pull of the path of least resistance. And over time, just like physical muscles, your cognitive muscles will adapt.
It gets easier.
Much easier. You will find that you can hold that complex argument in your head for 5 minutes before your mind wanders, then 10 minutes, then 20. You are transforming dead, mundane commute time into a literal crucible for cognitive growth.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about the invisible, brain-draining tax of attention residue. We've talked about ruthlessly curating our tools with the craftsman approach. We've talked about actively building our focus muscles through productive meditation. But all of this leads us to the final and perhaps the most insidious trap discussed in our notes.
The busyness trap.
Exactly. The massive, glaring difference between busyness and actual productivity. Emma and John introduced the concept of shallow work, and I think this is where many of our listeners are going to feel very, very seen, and maybe a little bit called out.
It is a vital distinction, and it's profoundly dangerous because shallow work is perfectly camouflaged as productivity. We must completely break down the illusion that simply being busy is a proxy for being productive.
Cal Newport has an incredibly insightful observation about this. He argues, though in the absence of clear, measurable indicators of what it actually means to be valuable and productive, human beings will inevitably default back to what he calls industrial indicators of productivity. Wait, industrial indicators of productivity. Break that down for us. What does that actually mean for the listener sitting at their laptop?
Think about a factory assembly line from 100 years ago. On an assembly line, productivity is entirely visible and easily measurable.
Right. Are your hands moving? Are you physically assembling the widgets?
Yeah.
Are you sweating?
Exactly. Are you at your station for 12 hours? If you are doing a lot of visible things, you are considered highly productive. The manager can walk the floor and literally see the productivity happening.
But knowledge work isn't an assembly line.
No, it isn't. In modern knowledge work, or in the pursuit of complex mastery like language learning, the actual work happens invisibly. It happens entirely inside your brain. It is silent. It is physically still. You might stare at a screen for 20 minutes without moving a muscle, but you're solving a massive logical problem.
But because we still crave the external validation of those old industrial indicators, we feel guilty when we're just sitting still and thinking.
So we substitute actual cognitive progress with the mere appearance of doing lots of things in a highly visible, frantic manner. We seek out tasks that let us click, sort, organize, mark as read, and move things around. Because the kinetic energy makes us feel like we are achieving something, even when the tasks themselves require almost zero cognitive depth.
Oh man, the source text gives the most painful, relatable examples of this good student illusion. Let me walk you through what this looks like for a language learner, but I want everyone listening to translate this into whatever their own work looks like.
Let's hear it.
It's the person who spends 3 hours perfectly organizing their digital flashcards into intricate nested folders. It's the person who sits down with 5 different colored highlighters and meticulously color codes their notebook pages so they look like a work of art.
The illusion of effort.
Yes. Or it's the person who spends 45 minutes searching YouTube for the absolute perfect video on English grammar, watching the first 2 minutes of 10 different videos, and then downloading 5 different language learning apps to their phone just in case. For a corporate worker, this is spending 2 hours reformatting an Excel sheet that no one is even going to read, or obsessively organizing your inbox into folders instead of actually writing the Q3 strategy report.
Exactly. The individual performing all those tasks feels incredibly busy. They feel a sense of righteous exhaustion at the end of the day. They are embodying the absolute picture of a good student or a hard worker. They are sitting at the desk, surrounded by materials, actively manipulating tools. But here is the hard, uncompromising question we have to pose to you, the listener. You feel busy. You feel dedicated. But in those 3 hours of color coding and app downloading, have you actually truly engaged with the material?
Have you forced your brain to grapple with a concept you didn't understand before? Have you synthesized new information? Have you practiced recalling complex rules from memory?
The answer is almost always a resounding no. You haven't done any of the actual hard work. You just built a really pretty scaffolding around the empty space where the work was supposed to happen.
You spent 3 hours preparing to work and called it working.
Precisely. And this leads to the most staggering contrast in the entire set of notes today. The source explicitly compares 2 vastly different paths. On one hand, you have the path we just described. You can spend 4 agonizing hours being visibly, frantically busy with your shallow tasks, your color coding, your organizing, your endless searching. You will end those 4 hours feeling drained, but you will have made absolute zero progress toward actual mastery.
Yes, and then we have to look at the alternative path. The text states that instead of 4 hours of shallow busyness, you can spend a mere 45 minutes in a state of deep, uncomfortable, intense focus.
Just 45 minutes, a fraction of the time.
But in those 45 minutes, you are doing high-leverage work. You're reading a difficult, conceptually dense text without looking away once. You're writing a complex essay from scratch. You're actively wrestling with the material without a single micro-distraction. If you do that, Em and John argue, you'll make a massive measurable leap forward in your capability. You accomplish more in 45 minutes of deep work than you do in 40 hours of shallow busyness.
It's the ultimate ROI on your time.
But I really want to stop and unpack a specific word that comes directly from the description of this state, the word uncomfortable. 45 minutes of deep, uncomfortable focus. Why uncomfortable? I think this is a huge revelation for a lot of people. Why is deep work inherently uncomfortable while color coding your nodes feels strangely pleasant?
That is the crux of the entire philosophy. Deep work is inherently uncomfortable because it requires profound cognitive strain. You are literally forcing your brain to form new neural connections. You are stretching it beyond its current capacity. You're forcing it to hold multiple complex variables in your working memory simultaneously.
It's heavy lifting.
It feels like mental friction. Your brain hates it. Your brain wants to conserve calories and stick to what it already knows how to do. Color coding, on the other hand, is just a simple pattern matching game. It requires zero cognitive strain. It's comfortable, predictable, and soothing.
So when I sit down to write a difficult report, and suddenly I feel this overwhelming urge to go clean my kitchen, that's my brain trying to escape the friction.
Exactly. When you sit down to do deep work, the immediate sensation you will feel is an intense, almost physical need to flee the discomfort. You will suddenly feel a desperate itch to check your email, to get a snack, to organize your desk, or to check the news.
Anything to stop the cognitive burn.
Right. But that discomfort is the exact indicator that you are actually doing the real work. If what you are doing feels entirely comfortable and easy, you are almost certainly trapped in the shallows.
So the discomfort is the compass. If it feels hard, you're going in the right direction. That is incredibly clarifying, but obviously we can't completely eliminate shallow work from our lives entirely, right? I still have to answer emails. I still have to pay bills. A language learner still needs to spend some time finding the right textbook or downloading the audio files. So what is the ultimate actionable takeaway here? How do we manage the shallows?
Emma and John revealed the final strategy here: drain the shallows.
Draining the shallows. It sounds like a structural solution.
It is. It acknowledges that shallow work is a reality of life, but it refuses to let that shallow work dictate your schedule or contaminate your focus. The implementation is simple but rigorous. You must aggressively schedule your shallow work into small, tightly contained blocks of time.
So instead of checking email constantly throughout the day, what do?
You might say, I will spend exactly 30 minutes from 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. answering emails, sorting my flashcards, and organizing my desk. You put a hard, uncompromising boundary around it. You quarantine the shallow work.
And the most important part of that rule is the second half. Do not let it bleed. You cannot let those shallow tasks bleed over into your dedicated deep learning time. When it is time for your 45 minutes of deep, uncomfortable focus, the email tab is closed, the phone is physically in another room, the colorful highlighters are put away. You protect that deep time with your life.
Precisely. And this leads to what I consider the absolute core philosophy of the entire deep work movement, summarized in a single, powerful directive. Be ruthless with your time so you can be generous with your focus.
Be ruthless with your time so you can be generous with your focus. I love that.
If you are sloppy and permissive with your time, allowing every ding, every WhatsApp message, every notification, and every trivial task to interrupt you, you will have nothing left to give to the work that actually matters. Your focus will be entirely depleted by the residue of 1,000 micro-distractions.
But if you are ruthless in defending your schedule,
if you ruthlessly quarantine the shallow work, and ruthlessly eliminate the low-leverage distractions using the craftsman approach, you create these beautiful, protected sanctuaries of time. And within those sanctuaries, you can afford to be incredibly generous with your attention, pouring all of your cognitive power into the pursuit of whatever it is you want to master.
Which brings us to a really beautiful concluding thought from our notes today. What is the ultimate point of all of this? Emma and John make it very clear in their outro that the true goal of deep work isn't to turn you into some miserable, relentless, robotic productivity machine.
It's not about grinding yourself into dust.
It's actually the exact opposite. Deep work is about efficiency and reality. It's about getting the truly important needle-moving things done in a concentrated burst of effort so that when you are finished, you can actually genuinely relax.
Yes. Think back to the scenario we opened the show with. The 4 hours of fake, exhausting busyness on a Sunday afternoon. When you finish those 4 hours, you don't feel relaxed.
You feel anxious.
You feel a lingering low-level guilt because, deep down, you didn't accomplish anything real. You just move papers around. But when you execute 45 minutes of true, uncomfortable, deep work, and you conquer a difficult concept or finish a hard draft, you experience a profound sense of genuine accomplishment.
And because you actually did the work, when you log off, you can log off completely. You can enjoy your evening, watch a movie, or hang out with friends without that nagging guilt in the back of your head.
Deep work is the key to true leisure.
Deep work is the key to true leisure. I think that's the perfect takeaway. So to wrap up today's deep dive, I want to reiterate the final challenge that Emma and John threw down for their listeners because it applies perfectly to you right now.
Let's hear the challenge.
Whatever it is you are trying to master today, whether it's studying a language, writing a report, coding a website, or building a project, take this challenge. Put your phone physically in another room. Close every single browser tab except the one you absolutely need. Accept that the discomfort is coming. Lean into it and truly deeply engage with the task in front of you for just 45 minutes.
It's a powerful challenge. But before we leave you, I want to offer one final, lingering question for you to ponder on your own. A thought that builds on everything we've discussed about eliminating the illusion of busyness.
Okay, what's the question?
We've talked about stripping away the shallow work, eliminating the color coding, crushing the endless context switching, and silencing the notifications. If you are successful in doing that, you will inevitably find yourself left with large pockets of quiet, unstructured time. Time where you are forced to actually confront the difficult work or simply be still. So the question is this: are you truly prepared for the profound, heavy silence of a distraction-free mind? Or, if you look very closely at your own habits, is your constant, frantic busyness secretly functioning as a comforting shield? Is it a way to protect yourself from the terrifying reality of being left completely alone with your own thoughts and the true limits of your current abilities?
Wow. Okay, let's let that sit. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the architecture of focus. Until next time, keep diving deep.